My name is Madison. I am 25 years old and work in an office. My spouse, Samuel, is 28 years old and was an upperclassman in college. After graduation, I had a drinking party with my college friends. Samuel also happened to be there. That is how we met. We didn't get to see each other while we were in college. So the drinking party felt like our first meeting. My husband, who was intoxicated at the time, made an urgent appeal to me. We decided to go out on the spontaneity of the moment. Even when he wasn't intoxicated, he told me he liked me, which convinced me that he actually did. My hubby is quite insistent. He was the one who persuaded me to marry him from the time we started dating. He would also compliment me, saying, "Your soup is delicious. I want to marry you. Thank you for washing my clothing. I want to marry you." It was simple things, but he made it clear that he wanted to marry me. He adores me, so it feels good. In fact, I'm overjoyed that he talked so much about our future together roughly a year into our relationship. I found out I was pregnant. To be honest, I thought it would be thrilling to have a child with him. Looking back, I sometimes wish I had been more cautious. When I told my husband I was pregnant, he was overjoyed. He is always action-oriented, therefore we registered for marriage on the same day. We were living together for the first time. We used to live on our own. I was secure in my chores and had my own style of doing things, so I was nervous about living with him. My husband had also been living alone for some time, and he claimed that he was confident in his chores. I felt this would be fine, and I had high hopes for him. But I only became disappointed. He began by cleaning the house and washing the dishes. However, the habit was broken after only 1 month. There were cups still on the table. Clothes were spread over the living room. He didn't take out the trash. I was in the early stages of pregnancy, so I attempted to obtain as much help from my spouse as possible with the housework. I said I wasn't feeling well today due to morning sickness. "Could you please clean up after dinner for me?" My spouse didn't even glance at me since he was so focused on his phone. I am now in the middle of a solid game. I'll do it later. I was curious if he was truly listening. I went to bed earlier. When I awoke the next morning, the dishes remained in the sink. My spouse was up late playing games on his phone. He's asleep in the living room. I was in tears because I was suffering and he was not responding to my plea for assistance. But I knew I couldn't give up at this point. I asked him to help me with the cleaning again that night. "Have you forgotten to wash the dishes yesterday? I would like you to accomplish it today if possible." "Okay, I understand." My mother would never say anything like that. For a time, what my spouse stated made me uncomfortable. I considered asking for more information, but my husband might become upset if I speak too much. I swallowed the anguish I was sure I was experiencing and simply said, "Thank you." The next morning, I felt so disappointed again. Yes, my spouse did clean the dishes, but he didn't. However, the dishes were not wiped dry. The sink was also not cleansed, and the surrounding area was soaked in water. Did I have to say, "Wash the dishes, wipe them, and put them back on the shelf"? I let out a long sigh, dejected. I had no choice but to put away the dishes. I wonder how my husband's life was when he lived alone. When I started to distrust him, he started talking about his mother a lot. "My mother never made me or my father do any chores." "I see. Was your mother working?" "She's a stay-at-home parent." "Well, she is a housewife, so she is meant to do the housework. My mother handled her chores flawlessly, you know." "I see. I wish you can be like my mother, Victoria. You should work hard." So for the first time, I discovered that my spouse called my mother-in-law Mama. I'd also discovered that she is his ideal mother and he wants me to be like her. I was astounded. Unfortunately, my husband had a mother complex. So since I am pregnant, how about I quit my work and become a full-time housewife? Then I can do some more chores. That is not good. In this day and age, both spouses should be working, right? You can't continue relying exclusively on my salary. My husband completely ignored my idea. "What? But you want me to be like your mother, don't you? You can at least strike a balance between job and household. Because that is the way things are now. So because you're claiming it's this day and age, you'll also split the housekeeping, correct?" What the heck? Even my mother would not make me do that. What he was saying was utterly bizarre. My head was filled with questions. In other words, he expected me to take care of everything at home, even the finances. It was too convenient for my spouse, and I couldn't tolerate it. I tried talking to him again and again, but he refused to change his mind. On the contrary, he stated something surprising. If you don't want to do your cleaning, I'll contact Mama. That is definitely better. Why would you do that? That is not what I meant. I just want you to do things correctly. I'm telling you, forcing me to do this is wrong. So if Mama arrives, it will be resolved. I'm not sure if it was because he wanted his adored mother to be near him, but my husband and I didn't get along well. I was worried as my tummy began to grow and became more visible. Finally, my mother-in-law began coming in and out of our house. Oh my, isn't this gross? I will do all of the chores for you. She was always really eager when she came to our house. It seemed as if she were repeating the chores I had completed one after the other. She was always trying to accomplish things, and I felt as if my speed was disrupted. This is our home, so you don't have to do much. It is all right. It would be better if I did it myself. I would rather do it myself. I told her what I wanted her to do, but she refused to listen. It is terrible that my mother-in-law and I could not communicate effectively. My mother-in-law seemed to be proud of her accomplishments so far. She'd frequently tell me stories like these. My husband is a little irritable, but he makes a lot of money. He is currently working abroad. Is this so? But it is partly because of me that he is able to focus on his work and earn so much. I'm confident Samuel will be just like his father. So you should learn from me, Natalie. Yes, this appears to be the reason why. My husband told me to be like my mother-in-law. I am sure my mother-in-law has been informing him about this concept for a long time. Oh, have you settled on a name for your child yet? No, we have not decided yet. Mama, I would like you to decide on the child's name. What? Mama will be a great assistance to us when the baby is delivered. So I don't mind if she makes the decision. Oh my God, I'm very happy. Even when I make a visibly disgusted face, they do not look at me. I am the one who will give birth to my baby. But I'm growing upset at their selfishness. I believe it was because of these days that I began to get frequent stomach cramps. I was stressed, and I felt like my body was beginning to show signals that I was not doing well. Every time my stomach grumbled, I was concerned that my child might suffer. I got worse and sicker at work, so I started taking longer and longer breaks. I felt horrible about this, so I decided to speak with my employer about it. I said, "Excuse me, I need to speak with you about something." My supervisor instantly told me that he could tell by my appearance that I wasn't feeling well. He urged that I begin maternity leave as soon as feasible. I felt awful and said, but my boss said he'd be happier if I had a healthy child and returned to work in good health. With his support, I decided to follow his suggestion and take maternity leave. Fortunately, others around me did not judge me for it, but rather supported me. When I return home, I will inform my husband that I am on maternity leave. My mother-in-law was present today, as she should be. When I told him about my maternity leave, my husband was not happy. What will you do during that time? How will you make a living? I can't work due to my medical condition. It's for the good of our child. Let's just get by on our own. If you're not feeling well, why don't you ask my mama to do the housework? Then you can head to work. Yes, it is correct. My mother-in-law's approbation is really aggravating. My mother-in-law is the source of my health problems, but my spouse doesn't realize. I did not appreciate his response and have lost interest in arguing with him further. I apologize, but if you can't understand what I say, I can't stay here. I'm on maternity leave and heading home to have a baby. So I'm heading back to my folks' place straight away. Return to your parents' house? What do you mean? I hope to give birth in my hometown without my husband's awareness. I was concerned that if I told my husband about it, he would say that he wanted my mother-in-law to be present, so I couldn't tell him. When they found out that I was returning to my hometown, they were both furious. You traitor! How dare you do this? You hurt my mother. Why don't you just have the baby here? Both of them were outraged, that I was astonished and overwhelmed. But I knew if I didn't leave, I'd be pushed around by my mother-in-law and my husband, who has a mother issue. I've already paid the hospital where I will give birth. You don't want to waste money, right? Actually, I have not paid for it yet. But to my stingy spouse, this life appears to be effective. With the two of them shaking with wrath, I hastily packed up my possessions and returned to my parents' house that day. Life at home is like bliss. I can spend time at my own speed and am relaxed. My abdominal tightness gradually subsided and my health stabilized. As for my mother-in-law and husband, I believe they are still quite upset that I would give birth here. They didn't contact me once while I was here. It actually made me feel comfortable and secure. I can spend my time without thinking about anything terrible. And I gave birth to a healthy baby boy on his due date. My husband probably forgot the due date because he never contacted me. It appears that he was unaware that I had given delivery, so I decided to inform him that the kid had been born safely. Then, after a lengthy time of silence, my husband called me. "You don't need to remain at your parents' place anymore, right?" The truth is, I wanted to stay at home for a bit longer and concentrate on raising my child. However, I had been staying at my parents' house for a long time and chose to return to my husband's residence. When I returned to my husband's home, my mother-in-law was waiting for me. I wondered how they'd react. When he saw his son's face, he complained, "Why did he need to look like Victoria? He should have looked more like me. He looks like you here and like me over here. He doesn't resemble Victoria, so it's fine." Even though I went through the pain and hardship of giving birth, they treated me horribly. I didn't have time to react to what my mother-in-law and spouse said. What was more stunning was that the house's layout had been substantially altered. I knew immediately that my mother-in-law had done it. "You did a lot of decorating, right?" "I am the one who did it. Since I began working remotely, I have had my mother visit me every day." I'd also had our room redecorated to my mother's preferences. They are chatting amicably in close proximity, and it seemed physically impossible for me to be here, so I turned away. I felt it unpleasant to have my mother-in-law by my side. I requested my mother-in-law to leave. I felt fatigued that day. She came to our house with a hefty box and intended to remain the night. So she disliked it. "If you insult me, you're going to get it." She exited the home with a loud bang. My mother-in-law did not come for several days. I felt really at ease, even when I had to care for my toddler. I apologized when my mother-in-law comes over. It would become chaos again, so I decided to prepare the documentation for submission to the office in the meanwhile. "Oh, I put them away here, but they are not here. I can't find my Bankbook or ID, which are required to submit the documents. I kept them in my room, so they couldn't have gone lost." I questioned my spouse just to be sure, but he stated he had no idea. I put things in a bag and stored them in a drawer in my room, so it's understandable that he was unaware of them. I looked for it in a corner of the house, thinking I must have left it somewhere while I was exhausted. However, the room was redecorated without my approval, so I couldn't find it easy. Because it is an essential issue, I suddenly felt uneasy. It's very likely a thief. Maybe they got in while we were away. I need to call 911. I took up the phone to contact the cops before anything bad happened. My spouse, looking impatient, stops me. "Stop it. I was at home most of the time. In terms of guests, only Mama visited the house. It isn't worth calling the cops, because even after all of this looking, I can't find it, you know? If it had been stolen, we'd be in serious trouble. Look again. If you don't search hard enough, you'll create Mama problems." My spouse pulled the phone from my grasp, seeking to prevent me from calling the police. Why is he so hurried? He doesn't return my phone for a time afterward. He has also made a number of comments defending his mother. I was skeptical of his behavior and determined to take serious measures. The next day, my mother-in-law paid us a visit for the first time in a long time. Her movements were clumsy and her demeanor was odd. She looked from left to right without looking at me. She seemed to be hiding something from me. So I asked her about it. "Emily, I'd like to ask you something. Did you happen to see my Bankbook and ID when you redecorated our room?" "Well, I don't know. I'm wondering what happened. I'm having a pretty difficult time finding them. So I'm thinking about contacting the cops." "What about the police?" "Oh, that's correct. I remember now. Do you remember? That purse features a flower design. It was inside your room. Did you lose it by chance? You can't even keep track of your possessions. You are so pathetic." She was agitated and raised her voice. My mother-in-law appeared suspicious, but I still couldn't understand how she could make fun of me. I believed that my mother-in-law required no mercy. I folded my arms. "How did you know the products were in the flower-patterned pouch?" "What?" My mother-in-law stiffened and looked guilty. My husband likewise became pale and held his head in his hands. Seeing the two of them together made me angry and ashamed of them, among other difficult emotions. "I see it now. Then I should leave it to the cops. Stop. Do not do that." At that point, sirens rang out from outside. "A police car is already outside. If you have an excuse, please provide it to the police." My husband and mother-in-law continued to create excuses. Please, I told them I didn't need to hear what they had to say. I decided to leave the rest to the police. My bank book and ID were returned to me by the cops. I knew my mother-in-law had stolen them. My mother-in-law, who disliked my behavior, used it to harass me. She attempted to withdraw money from my account, but was advised by the bank teller that only the account owner could do so. The bank refused to accept the withdrawal. Nonetheless, she kept my bank book and ID hidden to torment me. My husband was aware of what my mother-in-law had done, but he could not betray his beloved mother and injure her in return. When I found out about this, I threatened to divorce him. I thought I'd never want to see these guilty people again, so I sought child support in one lump sum. Of course, neither my husband nor my mother-in-law had the funds to do so. I told them to contact my father-in-law right then. My father-in-law appears to be a decent man. When he found out what my mother-in-law and husband had done, he supported me. He said he would take care of the child support, and that my mother-in-law and spouse were responsible for repaying him. Samuel and I were married for barely a brief time, but I am delighted I got rid of that man. Now that I'm a single mother, I'm excited to see my son grow up. My life is busy and challenging, but my son has made every day more enjoyable. I'm getting near to returning to work, and I'm trying to push myself to live strongly. As for my ex-husband, I've heard things about him after the divorce, and it appears that his mommy issue has worsened. An acquaintance of mine saw my ex-husband and mother-in-law walking hand in hand and was concerned about what was going on. I have no feelings for my ex-husband, so I can't laugh at these stories. I understand that they will never change, but I wanted them to settle their debt to my father-in-law.